Welcome. Thank you again for joining us today for our webinar, Powering Florida Cities and Counties with Solar, Expanding Access to Savings, Local Jobs, and Economic Investment. Before we get started, I just want to go over a few logistics and reminders. We will keep all attendees on mute throughout the session, and we encourage everyone to please type your questions for the presenters into the Q&A box where other attendees can see them. And we will be answering the audience questions at the end of the session, and we'll do our best to get to as many of the questions as we can. You can like or upvote questions that you also want to hear answered, and that will help us identify and prioritize the popular questions. You can use the chat if you want to communicate with the event host, if you're having any technical issues or have a private comment. But for the most part, please use the Q&A. And we will make a recording available after today. Next slide, please. So this webinar today is brought to you by Generation 180 and Solar United Neighbors. And this is the second webinar we are co-hosting about expanding access to solar in Florida. On Monday, we held an event focused on how Florida schools can gain access to solar. And our speakers included Osceola County School District, which boasts the first net zero energy school in Florida. We also heard from Superintendent in Tucson, Arizona, where they're saving $43 million over 20 years through solar. And we also had a school district in Middlesex County, Virginia, which was the first in the state to power 100% of its schools with solar. You can find the recording of that webinar on our YouTube channel by searching Generation 180 or Solar United Neighbors on YouTube. I'm Tish DeBlon. I'm the Program Director of Generation 180, which is a national nonprofit organization based in Charlottesville, Virginia, whose mission is to inspire and equip people to take action on clean energy in their homes and communities. I lead our nationwide Solar for All Schools campaign. And today I'll be talking with you about the benefits of solar for schools and how the benefits of solar for schools and municipalities and how solar projects on schools are most often funded, which is by third-party power purchase agreements, or PPAs. And then Heaven will tell you more about the upcoming opportunity in the Florida legislature to allow PPAs in Florida and to enable all schools, local governments, and nonprofits to go solar using this financing mechanism. And so now I'll let Heaven come on and introduce herself and Solar United Neighbors.
Thanks, Tish. My name is Heaven Campbell. I'm the Florida Program Director of Solar United Neighbors. Solar United Neighbors is a national nonprofit, and our mission is to rebuild the energy system with rooftop solar as the cornerstone of the new energy system. And we help people go solar, join together, and fight for their energy rights. Next slide.
Thank you. And today we're thrilled to also have with us 3 visionary municipal leaders who will share their solar journeys with you. So first we'll hear from Chris Castro, the Director of Sustainability and Resilience at the City of Orlando, which has committed to get to 100% clean energy. And next up is Rob Riles, the Director of Facilities Management at Macon-Bibb County, which was the first in Georgia to utilize a solar energy procurement agreement like a PPA. After that, you will hear from Shelby Bousseau, the Chief Sustainability Officer at the City of Atlanta, and she will talk about the city's commitment to 100% clean energy future and how they plan to get there. Next slide, please. For those of you who are not familiar with my organization, Generation 180 is a national clean energy nonprofit organization based in Charlottesville, Virginia. And we focus on inspiring and equipping people to take action on clean energy in their homes, schools, and communities. And today our webinar is part of our Solar for All Schools campaign, which is leading a nationwide movement to help schools reduce energy costs, enhance student learning, and foster healthier communities for all. With a school in every community, we leverage the integral role that K-12 schools can play in reaching students, families, neighbors, and in modeling the benefits of clean energy adoption. Next slide. So putting solar on public buildings provides many benefits to the local governments, the taxpayers, and the community. Going solar helps save on energy costs, which is especially critical this year as the pandemic has decimated state and local budgets. And going solar also creates local economic investment and local jobs. And according to the Bureau of Labor, solar installer is currently the fastest growing occupation in the country. Another benefit for localities is that combining solar and storage provides opportunities to create resilient emergency centers for the community after natural disasters or during grid outages. And this is a community asset that I think is especially important in Florida. And Heaven will talk more about the job creation and economic impact opportunities that solar can bring in the state. Next slide. So while many of you may agree that going solar would be beneficial, and that sounds great, but you may wonder how it is you can afford to go solar. So last fall, we conducted a national census and issued a report on nationwide schools that have gone solar. And our research found that only 14% of the solar installed on schools was funded by the schools through bond, cash, or other mechanism. So this may surprise you that most of the time, schools are not purchasing their own solar panels. So actually 79% of the solar installed on schools was funded and owned by a third party. So that could be a lease, utility owned, or community solar. However, most of those projects were actually funded by a mechanism called power purchase agreements. So that's an arrangement in which a solar developer pays for and owns the system for a set amount of time, often 20 or more years, and the customer would typically pay no upfront or maintenance costs, and the customer purchases the solar energy produced, typically at a lower rate than what would be paid to the utility. So this is how schools are able to afford solar and see immediate energy cost savings. So our presenters from Georgia will be talking more about what their PPAs look like in their state. Next slide. So the schools that were able to take advantage of third-party ownership or power purchase agreements must be in a state where it has been allowed by law. So power purchase agreements are currently allowed in 28 states and DC. And you can look at this map, you see the top states for solar and schools show up as navy blue. So 9 of these 10 top states explicitly allow third-party power purchase agreements, and that's what's funded most of these projects to help get them to be in the top 10 in the country for solar and schools. Unfortunately, Florida does not yet allow power purchase agreements. And sadly, the Sunshine State only ranks 24th in the nation for the amount of solar installed on schools. So we'll be talking more about what we can do to fix that. Next slide. So I wanted to share some findings from a recent report put out by Iowa's auditor of the state. So this report studied a sample of solar projects on public buildings, both school, city, and county buildings, and it found that most were funded by power purchase agreements. And it also saw an annual cost savings per project of up to $80,000 per year. It also estimated that if all of the cities, counties, and schools in the state of Iowa went solar with an average size system, the state would save the taxpayers $375 million over the life of those panels. So those are some incredible benefits that we are hoping to bring to Florida. Next slide. So in my home state of Virginia, we see an example of what can happen when schools are allowed to use power purchase agreements to go solar with no upfront costs and realize immediate energy savings. So in 2013, a law was passed to create a pilot program to allow power purchase agreements of up to 50 megawatts in one utility territory in the state. And it took a few years for schools to catch on to this opportunity to save money and by going solar without having to find cash in the budget. And once that happened, within the last few years, solar on schools in Virginia really took off. So we now estimate that there are over 30 megawatts of solar installed on Virginia's K-12 schools, which is over 100-fold growth from where we started before PPAs were enabled. Next slide. And these incredible growth numbers don't include the largest municipal solar project planned in the state, which is just getting started. So Fairfax County, which is just outside of Washington, DC, is planning solar arrays for up to 113 county and school sites combined. And through this project, they anticipate seeing $60 million in savings over 25 years. So it's a great example of how municipal and school districts can work together to go solar. I also love this story because it was student-led. This whole initiative to go solar actually started with some high school students that really wanted to see solar on schools. So in the picture, you see a high school student presenting to the school board. You see a coalition of high school students from multiple different high schools in the district getting together to talk about their plans to go solar. And in the photo in the bottom, they're meeting with a state delegate who helped pass a law in 2020 to help expand solar PPAs in the state of Virginia. Next slide. So finally, I just want to share our website link, which has lots of resources on how to help schools go solar. It has a how-to guide that walks you through the process step by step. It includes the introduction to solar financing. And all of these resources are equally applicable to whether you're city, county, school district. These resources really help you if you're just getting started. And we also have a Solar Schools campaign toolkit. If you are a solar supporter listening, but you don't work for the local government, you can be an advocate for solar just like those students were at their school. And thank you. So next I'm going to hand it over to Heaven Campbell at Sun.
Thanks, Tish. As I said before, Solar United Neighbors is a national nonprofit. We like to say that we're a community of people who are building a new energy system. And we, being a national nonprofit, work in many states that do have PPAs. I like to say that our Florida program is the biggest and brightest. So obviously we are actively trying to expand solar access here in Florida to include power purchase agreements. Next slide. So just to reiterate, a power purchase agreement is a financing option that allows for organizations to go solar with zero upfront costs. And these organizations are usually large organizations that are often tax exempt. A third-party developer will own and operate and maintain that system. So handle all of the operations and maintenance. And then that developer will sell electricity back to the host site at a reduced rate. So as you saw in one of Tish's last slides, that reduced rate was only, about 1 to 2% low, or 1 to 2 cents lower than the utility rate, and they are still poised to save $60 million over 25 years. The developer or clean energy supplier is able to do this, and it's financially beneficial to them because they are a for-profit and are able to take the investment tax credit that comes with installing the solar energy system. Next slide. So here in Florida, as Tish pointed out, we are one of 7 states that explicitly in our statutes do not allow for power purchase agreements. So that language is basically that anyone who's selling or exchanging kilowatt hours has to be a public utility. And that bars third-party developers from being able to operate in our state. Other states have made it much easier for power purchase agreements to operate, opening that savings tool to municipalities, counties, nonprofits, schools, and other entities. Next slide. So we had a really good inkling that power purchase agreements would work well here in the Sunshine State. But to make sure we had data to back up our claims, we commissioned a report and impact analysis on what would happen if we were to legalize power purchase agreements here in Florida. So we had researchers from Ohio University who are familiar with PPAs, and from the University of Central Florida, which is a leader in clean energy here in Florida, to take a look at it and give us some stats to back up our claims. Next slide. So what they did was give us 3 different scenarios: a low, moderate, and high scenario of adoption in the immediate term if we were to legalize power purchase agreements, and what the benefits and impact on our state would be using those different modeled out scenarios. So the low scenario is what I'll touch on today, just to be super conservative. And the impact there would be 1.2 gigawatts of additional solar. So that's really big. Next slide. Let's look at what this means in actual tangible impact for the state. The one-time economic impact from just the construction of that low scenario solar adoption would be $2.3 billion injected into our state economy. Next slide. This is something that I really love because that's not just a one-time impact. It would continue to trickle into the economy for years to come. So that low scenario, the economic impact on an annual basis would be $16 million into the economy. Next slide. A lot of us are really concerned with climate change, and here in Florida, we're really ground zero, especially for sea level rise, and we have a lot at stake. So one of the things that we wanted to look at was what would this do for greenhouse gas mitigation efforts? In the low scenario, it would reduce greenhouse gas by 1.8 million tons per year. So that's an annual impact. The equivalent in cars taken off the road, since that's kind of easier for us to understand, is about 88,000, more than 88,000 cars, again, annually. Next slide. So we also took a quick look at some case studies. These are real life scenarios where these organizations are already utilizing solar or want to utilize solar and need to add on to their solar capacity. So again, this is kind of like a large, medium, small scenario. The large scenario was the city of Orlando. So Orlando is one of the major metropolitan hubs of Florida. The medium scenario was an average size school district here in Florida. And then the small scenario was First Unitarian, also in Orlando, Florida, a church that has been trying to go solar for a while. So let's zoom in on the city of Orlando and what that would look like for them. Oops, this last slide.
I think that's my cue.
No, I think I had a couple more slides, but
I guess not.
okay. Next.
Yeah, I don't have any more. Next one's Macon-Bibb in my deck.
Okay, we'll loop back to the rest of them later. Then you are completely up, Chris.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Heaven and Tish, for the opportunity to join you all today. Let me quickly pull up my presentation here. All right, so my name is Chris Castro. I direct the Office of Sustainability and Resilience here at the City of Orlando, and I'm excited about this conversation because PPAs have been a policy solution that I've been advocating for here in Florida for about a decade, and it's something that I'm grateful that the Florida Sun team moved forward with this PPA study, because it really does open the eyes of I think our elected leaders as to the potential savings specifically for government, for schools, for universities, for hospitals, for churches, a lot of these nonprofit tax-exempt entities. Today I'll talk about the work that the City of Orlando is doing despite not having a PPA, and our ambitious efforts to still move us forward towards 100% renewables. And then we could dive into kind of some Q&A about what this might look like if we were to expand into the PPA scenario. So just starting out, I wanted to give you a little overview of our journey. Orlando really started to focus on sustainability and resilience back in 2007. Our current mayor, Buddy Dyer, launched GreenWorks Orlando as this comprehensive initiative to transition Orlando into a city of the future at the forefront of sustainability and resilience. I vividly remember him saying, I want us to transform Orlando into one of the most environmentally friendly, socially equitable and inclusive and economically vibrant and diverse communities in America. And to me, that was an eye-opener to have an elected leader like Mayor Dyer at the helm of one of the largest cities in the country that really wanted to move us in the right direction. So GreenWorks has evolved greatly over the years. At first, it was just an initiative in the mayor's office, and today it's a full-fledged Office of Sustainability and Resilience with about a dozen project managers and coordinators that are driving forward different policies and programs, both internally to the city as well as citywide. So I also think it's important to realize that there's a lot of connections to our work and the Sustainable Development Goals. Orlando is in the process of actually publishing our first voluntary local review, aligning our local priorities to these global goals. And I think it's important to realize that this topic of clean energy not only has its own goal in the global framework, goal number 7, but it also trickles into things like decent work and economic growth, good health and well-being, addressing the climate crisis, the importance of sustainable cities and communities, and of course, partnerships and creative ways in which we can collaborate with the business community, our utilities, and other partners to advance these goals. As it relates to data—
Chris, do you mind if I, yes. We had a couple of questions to see if we can fix your screen so they can see your slide bigger. Would you mind pausing for a second and see if we could tinker with your screen? There we go.
Okay, apologies for the change up there. So yeah, of course. So yeah, in terms of the data, I thought it's important for you all to see Orlando's carbon footprint, our greenhouse gas emissions inventory, which we've been doing since 2007. And as you can see on the right-hand side, the majority of our carbon footprint is actually coming from the building sector, both residential, commercial, and industrial buildings that are consuming dirty energy, both on-site and through electricity that's coming from primarily coal and natural gas today. And so when we look at how cities can address the climate crisis, more often than not, the built environment is one of those areas that not only has the biggest footprint, but also has the most cost-effective strategies to reduce emissions, drive the economy, improve public health, and of course, address the environmental issues. So we have kind of developed this strategy, and I know my colleague Shelby is also, the city of Atlanta is also part of the American Cities Climate Challenge. This is a group of 25 cities that are collaborating together to really deepen our commitment on climate and reducing those emissions. And our strategies really fall in these 4 key buckets. And you can see that second bucket is really targeting what we're talking about today, that is decarbonizing the electric grid and moving towards renewables. So Orlando is unique in that we do own and operate our own municipal electric and water utility. It's known as OUC. We call it OUC, the reliable and sustainable one. And what's unique about OUC is we're vertically integrated. We have power generation, transmission, and distribution, own all of the equipment up and down that spectrum. And OUC is also known for being very diverse in its fuel mix in terms of how we generate power. And as you can see there, everything from coal and natural gas, nuclear, solar, and the like. Now, the city of Orlando made a bold commitment in 2017 that we wanted to transition our entire electric grid to 100% renewables for municipal operations by 2030 and the entire city by 2050. Every home, every hotel, every theme park, every resident powered by clean energy. And often cities are at odds. There are hundreds of cities now around the country that have committed to 100% renewables, but they don't often have the control of their utilities. They may be subject to an investor-owned utility. They may not have the best relationship even with their own municipal utility. And so something that I think we're proud of in Orlando is the alignment of both the city's commitments and our utilities commitments. This doesn't happen every day and in every city. But just this past December, just a couple of months ago, OUC completed an 18-month exercise of an energy integrated resource plan, looking out to the year of 2050 as to how we were going to meet our future energy demands. And what you see here is what we came out with to the public. And our commitment is net zero carbon by 2050 without offsets, intermediate targets of CO2 reduction in alignment with science-based targets in the Paris Agreement, under a 1.5 degree rise, and then early retirement of our coal plants and the rest of our coal fleet in Orlando, at the latest by 2027, and certainly drastic reductions before then. And I think that's important to realize because these plants could continue to operate into 2050 and 2060 because they're relatively new. So in terms of how we go about moving in that direction, first and foremost, we have to start to do solar feasibility assessments and map our community, both from a theoretical standpoint. This is a snapshot of Google Project Sunroof, and we've worked with GreenLink Analytics in Atlanta to help us better understand what the potential capacity is for rooftop solar, just rooftops. And as you can see there, 92% of rooftops in Orlando actually have adequate amount of sunlight to make the economics work for going rooftop solar. It's about 2 gigawatts of rooftop solar capacity. And so we've really started to identify what city buildings actually make a lot of sense for this. And unfortunately, without PPAs, the city of Orlando has had to look to the green bond market and essentially procure, own, and operate our own rooftop solar projects. We look at the long-term economic benefits, even of making that investment, without being able to tap into the investment tax credit. That's a huge issue, leaving now 26% on the table before 30% for a lot of these arrays, and not being able to accelerate that depreciation and be able to take those tax benefits as well. So it's considerable, but even with that, our commitment at the city and our city's leadership still realize the importance of making those investments. So this is an example of one of the first rooftop solar projects we have in Orlando at our Fleet and Facilities Complex. We have since started to add rooftop solar to every new construction project in the city of Orlando. That includes permit and records buildings, and most recently, our newest fire stations that essentially, over the course of COVID, actually were able to install these arrays as closer to that goal. In addition, you can see some of those interesting arrays there. In addition, we are really focused on trying to support our residents in going solar as well from a rooftop perspective. And so, of course, we've been partnering with FL Sun since the inception here in Florida in 2016, and done a co-op at least once every single year, if not a couple. And we've seen some pretty considerable growth across the state of Florida. FL Sun's done incredible work, and now in the tens, dozens of megawatts that have been added. And in just Orlando, hundreds of homes have gone solar over the last few years just through this interesting cooperative model. So we're getting creative despite lacking a PPA policy to help enable more rooftop solar. Our community realized that we still needed to move this forward and get creative with these types of cooperative models. In addition, we're beginning to build out a lot more community solar. This is one actually on a coal ash landfill. I always like to share the irony of this array, but little by little, we've added a pretty significant amount of our own generation. This is an array that just came online, about 107 megawatts, that's now powering Orlando, and we have about another 150 in the pipeline here. These are arrays procured by our utility through power purchase agreements, believe it or not, right? As a municipal utility, they're also tax exempt, quasi-governmental, and so even these large arrays are procured through these PPA mechanisms. So it's interesting that utilities can take advantage of PPAs, but not the end user. And then floating solar. There is a tremendous amount happening in Orlando as a national test site for NREL to look at photovoltaics, the ability of using these man-made retention pond water bodies to actually install floating solar panels on top of them. This is at a local wastewater treatment plant in the region. And most recently at the Orlando International Airport, we have installed a floating solar array in the shape of the Orlando logo. And so as you come on your autonomous tram from the main terminal to your plane, you'll be able to see these across our pond systems in Orlando. And the last thing I wanted to share with you is that we're thinking about the intermittency issues, and we're thinking about long-term energy storage. We're beginning to pilot flow batteries, vanadium redox flow batteries. We're looking at lithium ion, of course, in distributed lights. But we did secure a pretty large hydrogen grant for us to begin to utilize green hydrogen, floating solar to electrolyzing water, storing that hydrogen, and then fusing it in a fuel cell to true up the solar generation that we see potentially being lost because of cloud cover or extended storms. So despite the lack of PPAs, we're still moving forward. But I do want to leave you with the fact that if we were to enable PPAs here, And in the study that Heaven mentioned, we looked at potentially 18 megawatts of generation that would save us $400,000 plus per year without spending a single taxpayer dollar to help us expand this. And that's the ultimate goal. If we do this from a piecemealed approach, I don't think we'll ever hit our goals. So it's imperative that we continue to move forward with progressive policy that really allows us to enable this distributed generation market. And with that, I'll turn it back to the team. Thank you.
Chris, that was amazing. I'm so excited to hear about all the things that City of Orlando is working on. And I must say that is the first time I've heard photovoltaics, and I'm just gonna have to come to Orlando sometime and see it for myself. But that's very exciting. Thanks.
We'd
so
love
much,
to invite you.
All right, and I see some questions popping up and we will circle back to them at the end. But next we're gonna bring up Rob Riles from Macon-Bibb County in Georgia. And I'm happy to have him tell his solar story. Rob, take it away.
Thanks, Tish. I am Rob Riles with Macon-Bibb County Government in Macon, Georgia. We have a little less aggressive program than Chris does in Orlando. I'm very impressed with his presentation, very impressed with their aggressiveness in pertaining to solar, in spite of the fact that they don't have the benefits of the SEPA agreements and PPAs. That's amazing. Would love to look deeper into their program for opportunities and some suggestions and recommendations. We began our solar journey over a decade ago, mainly with small projects and fire stations, like putting small few solar panels on fire stations to provide power for our water heaters and other appliances, stuff like that. By the same time, we engaged in energy savings projects, ESCO projects, to become more efficient and save power as well. Our local utility provider encouraged that and supported it. They supported as they do now, the reduction and efficiency as far as energy consumption. Also offered rebates, for such projects. So that was our primary motivation, was money, just to save money. As time goes on, you learn that people change. In terms of in words of an old, a great Bob Dylan song, these times are changing, and so are people, and people's priorities, and people's appreciation for the natural resources and the world that we leave for future generations, and likewise for us. So like Chris was talking about, our carbon footprint become a concern of ours as well. We want to do our part to reduce emissions as well. What really got the ball rolling for us, so as far as our current solar program, is the passing of the 2015 Georgia HR bill, allowing the opportunity for us to enter into SEPA agreements with a solar provider and a solar partner. One of the first hurdles to do so, and being a pioneer or being the first to engage, it provides a lot of pride, but it also provides some pain in navigating uncharted waters. And we feel like our solar partner has been extremely instrumental in navigating those waters and negotiating, massaging relationships with the local utility provider, as well as the benefits that they provide to us with our particular SEPA agreement is really hard to argue with. In my opinion, it's a no-brainer, and it's a win-win for everybody, especially the citizens of Macon-Bibb, in terms of saving money. That was still a major motivator in our pursuit of the benefits and opportunity for the SEPA agreements. We also, at the time, had a mayor, and we still do. Our current mayor is extremely supportive of the program as well. But we had a mayor who had the foresight and innovative thinking to often think outside the box and explore new and creative means to become more successful and more financially efficient and save money. In 2014, the city of Macon and the county of Bibb consolidated, and the HR bill allowing for that consolidation provided mandates of reduction in our overall budgets, the combined budgets of the two governments, by 20%. So that encouraged us. I think necessity is the mother of invention, as well as creativity. And so we had to reduce our combined budgets by 20% in 4 years. And so that helped us to begin to look in a lot of areas, in a lot of different ways to reduce our budgets. And the savings that the CEPAs allowed us to engage in definitely helps. I think equally as important, though, is the eco-friendly, clean, sustainable, renewable alternative to traditional power sources and the world we leave behind. The HR bill allowed us to seek out a solar partner. One of the hurdles was to do so in a fair, equitable way on a level playing field for potential solar energy partners and solar energy providers. We did so by putting out an RFQ for qualifications in the field, and I believe throughout the process, and our team who graded and chose the partner that we ended up with, I believe in my opinion, we had the best in the business. I think they have a team assembled with amazing key players in different areas that are able to negotiate those uncharted waters and have proven so with our local utility providers as we get into different projects. Our first project was extremely, well, it wasn't extremely difficult, but it was difficult in terms of establishing protocol with the local utility provider for the installation. Their protection of their massive utility infrastructure is paramount to them, and understandably so. We've always had a very, very respectful, very good partnership and relationship with our local provider. We have about 330 electrical accounts with our local electrical provider. Therefore, we're a substantial customer to them. And so they are a good partner, and we do have a good relationship with them. Each one of the projects that we've put together has helped us to establish a better relationship with them, and our solar provider, Cherry Street Energies, has pretty much streamlined the process. Each individual project has its own particular challenges depending on the operation, depending on size, depending on what type of network distribution we are serviced with from our local provider, whether it's a standard distribution or a spot network or the underground grid downtown, and they have different degrees of protection for different types of distribution. The Cherry Street Energies team worked very close with our local provider to make sure that they are happy with our designs and our engineering, as well as any concerns that they have. That we have our very first one solar array was our Sheriff's Investigative Center, and that one pretty much set the pace, set the protocol between the solar provider and the local utility company. Set up witness tests to test the system to make sure that the inverters ramp down so as not to backfeed on the grid, depending on the consumption rate inside the facility and that kind of stuff. Through that, I believe their initial skepticism has been relieved, and I think they see our solar provider as not only capable, but concerned about protecting their infrastructure as well. We have installed 2 major solar arrays. We have engaged and explored 3 different types. The rooftop that you see on the slide here, the parking lot canopy that we have at the Sheriff's Investigative Center. We have a ground mount. Yeah, this is the one, and there are additional benefits to that particular type of canopy that actually increases the support for a canopy like that. This facility, when we put this array up at this facility, other facilities and departments in our government have asked us to consider their facility for solar simply because of the additional benefits that that type of array provides. The LED lighting, for instance, is part of the solar array system. So I have a well-lit parking lot there with this superior saturation of light, LED lighting, efficient lighting, at no cost to us or the taxpayers as part of the system. Another benefit from the SEPA and the PPAs is that, like Chris said, he has to maintain, he owns and maintains his own infrastructure. These arrays and this infrastructure belongs to our solar providers. Therefore, I don't have to tie up any human resources to maintain it. They do an excellent job at maintaining it, because if it's not running at its optimal performance, then they're not selling as much solar energy. That's a big plus to us, because in part of our combining our governments and reducing our budget, we've also reduced our manpower. So our workload versus manpower is a huge challenge as well. The bottom line is, with our PPAs and our SEPA agreement with Cherry Street Energies will designs, engineers, and provides a plan for each installation on each project. And we then negotiate a rate that is lower than our traditional utility rate to begin with. And once that's established, and once we agree to a project and a design and plan, as well as a rate, then they assume all the risk on the construction costs going up, steel going up, and we all know that's a real potential with the pandemic and lead times and price of material going up as far as construction. But they assume all risk, they assume all costs. We simply buy power cheaper from them than we buy from the traditional provider. Really, there's no risk in this. It's hard to have opposition to that type of that kind of opportunity. This is a Macon Coliseum, and it's one of our biggest venues. It's probably our largest energy consumer, because it's also attached to a very large convention center as well. And both facilities are under the same electrical service. So therefore, the maximum size of this array is based on the total consumption rate of the whole facility. You see the solar panels out front. I did encounter some opposition when I was presenting this and leading up to my presentation to commission. And it was there was a local businessman, very highly respected in the community. He was opposed to it. In my opinion, of the aesthetics, a lot of things that he had to say about the solar array not being attractive and whatnot was, I just had a totally opposite opinion. And I was asked to see about putting the solar arrays down around, basically hidden from the facility. And I just didn't, I got with the mayor and didn't want to, because in my opinion, these type of projects and this type of infrastructure welcomes citizens as well as businesses of town when they see that the town is and a community is innovative on the cusp of, and cutting edge of technology, I think it encourages businesses and individuals to move to that town, seeking jobs in these fields as well as others. But anyway, we were successfully getting that approved. We're working on that design and get ready to implement it as soon as possible. But we just, right now, we're about to break ground on 2 more at our animal welfare facility, as well as our tax commissioner's office within the next couple of weeks. Bottom line is for us, it's no risk, no cost, no headaches because of no maintenance. It's just a win-win for everybody, in my opinion.
Thank you, Rob. You just laid it out so simply right at the end there. And I think that's so helpful to hear how you, as really the first in the state to utilize this kind of agreement, how to overcome some barriers and really had to work through some of the kinks, being the trailblazer. So thank you for sharing your experience in doing that. And we're excited to see these new projects come on board.
Thank you.
So thank you. And so next we have Shelby Busseau. She is with the City of Atlanta, and we're excited to hear more about what you're working on there. And Atlanta is my hometown where I grew up, so I love seeing what you're doing and in the city where I grew up. Thanks, Shelby.
That's great to hear. Fun facts. Thanks, you guys. I appreciate being here, and this has been fascinating so far. I loved hearing, love hearing from Chris and from hearing about some updates on Rob's work as well. We really respect that leadership out of Georgia and are happy to have followed suit. And I'll talk through that a little bit, but it might also help to understand where our office sits within the City of Atlanta. So as was mentioned, I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer, and I work in the Office of One Atlanta, which is somewhat uniquely situated in the mayor's office as kind of a conglomeration of different offices. So I lead the Office of Resilience team, but we work really collaboratively and report up through our equity office, which includes racial equity work, LGBTQ affairs, and others. We work closely with our Chief Health Officer and our Office of Immigrant Affairs. So we're kind of all of the pillars of the mayor's real priorities, and that's a really exciting place to be for new policy development and to have the flexibility to work collaboratively with our partners to make sure all of our work is not only equity centered, but also focuses on the health outcomes and how everything we do is going to impact various communities. So if we move on to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more specifically today about our energy work. Our Office of Resilience actually has focus areas in urban agriculture, waste diversion, sustainability, resilience, and clean energy. And so as a little bit of background information, in 2017, the Atlanta City Council passed a resolution for our office to develop a plan to transition Atlanta to 100% clean energy by 2035. After months of research, stakeholder engagement, and plan writing, the council finally adopted our Clean Energy Atlanta plan, which is a vision for 100% clean energy future. If you want more information or just to actually, some light reading in the evening time, you can check out our plan and a lot more information about Clean Energy Atlanta at 100atl.com. Next slide. Okay, so we defined clean energy in a particular way, because I think, we do throw around a lot of different terms, and it's helpful to know for us what we're really talking about is energy efficiency first. We're talking about wind, solar, existing and low impact hydroelectric, geothermal, biogas, and wave technology sources where applicable. And of course, that energy efficiency work will include traditional technology as well as behavioral measures and cogeneration and district heat and cooling where possible. So I thought that was a helpful definition to include here. Next slide. So municipal operations are a significant piece to reaching our goal, and that to reaching our 100% clean energy goal. Atlanta, of course, those of you who are familiar know that Atlanta owns both the busiest airport in the world as well as operates a water utility, which makes us the largest single electricity user in all of Atlanta. Still though, we realized that that really is only 7% of the total usage of the whole city. And we do want to lead by example first by addressing that 7%, but there's a lot more external work to do for the other 93%. So when we talk about Solar Atlanta, our Solar Atlanta program in particular, we are talking about the municipal operations piece that we want to start with. Next slide. So as a part of our stakeholder engagement process, we really identified 3 priorities that needed to be our primary focus areas. So energy equity is really our first priority. Like I said, it must be included in every plan and project, program and project that we implement in the city of Atlanta. We also knew that we'll have to invest in energy efficiency first. But the third priority really was that local investments in renewable energy must be prioritized over investments outside of the Atlanta metro. So we knew, again, a program like Solar Atlanta will kind of check a lot of those boxes. Next slide. So for Atlanta, we actually now have solar installed on 14 of our facilities. And we're currently working to expand that solar portfolio. We've identified in partnership with our contractor several different opportunities that will significantly magnify that, that footprint. The original contract that exists right now was for up to 1.25 megawatts of solar, but with some built-in flexibility to handle the system upgrades and building specific opportunities or issues. Next slide. So here we go. Yep. In the state of Georgia, as you've heard, we call PPAs solar energy procurement agreements, or SEPAs. It's the same thing, just called a different name. In 2017, we signed a contract with Cherry Street Energy for 20 years to provide solar energy to select municipal buildings. Cherry Street owns, operates, and maintains the systems. This is the same that Rob was talking about, and that's really been a great model for us to be able to rely on them. The city pays for the solar feeding into our buildings at a fixed rate with a fixed yearly escalation, expected to be at least very cost neutral, but hopefully we'll even see some significant savings. And I think in Macon, they already see those. And really, I'll just highlight that the value here, and we try to not always emphasize exactly how much savings there will be, because for the most part, these installations go on buildings that use a lot more electricity than just what's generated on site. So as utility bills go up, there may not always be a net savings overall. And so to be more clear about that, it's really focusing on the predictability that this utility structure allows for the city when we come to planning and budgeting, that we find very valuable to know how much it's going to cost us down the road. So if you go to the next slide, I outlined a few more of those SEPA benefits. There's no upfront cost to the city, which is amazing. Upfront investments can be just a huge barrier to overcome for a municipality. During the passage of the Clean Energy Plan, some council members were even concerned about the cost and feasibility of achieving our goals, and SEPA was really a great model and an answer to those questions that we were able to point to demonstrate some creative and cost-effective ways to make progress toward our goal. Again, that long-term predictability price predictability is really helpful. We know how much we will be spending for solar electricity at these sites for the next 20 years, whereas a normal electric rate, will be regulated by the state. It could change. It's a little less predictable. And we expect to see substantial increases in the price of electricity in our jurisdiction in particular. So that was really helpful to lock those rates in for 20 years. We also really placed a high value on local investment in clean energy. As we heard from the stakeholders that we need to prioritize this, we really see the SEPA and investment in renewables as a benefit to the economic development and job creation that could benefit Atlanta. Further, there's operation and maintenance performed by Cherry Street that's included in our contract. So we have experts really on call to maintain our systems, flexibility to remove systems temporarily if the roof work is needed, or et cetera. Of course, we reduce building emissions. We think this will help us, toward achieve our 100% goal. And it's worth mentioning that Atlanta and other cities always appreciate being an early adopter and having these type of peer sharing opportunities. We've really enjoyed being able to share our experience with other communities in Georgia looking to go solar. It's awesome to be a model and to show where, we made mistakes along the way, and we can share those and learn so that the next time around we can all do it better and bigger down the road. But I'll stop there so that we can have some time for questions. Thanks.
Shelby, thanks so much. It's so great to hear about what you're working on, and I'm excited to hear about this vision for 100% clean energy. Next, we'll have Heaven Campbell and come back and tell us a little bit more about the legislation we've been alluding to throughout the presentation and how you can get involved in helping us pass this policy.
Thanks, Tish. And wow, what a great testament to solar we've heard today. Really proud to be able to feature these speakers and learn from what they're doing. So the current bills that we have in Florida in our session right now that are seeking to legalize power purchase agreements for our state are Senate Bill 1718 and House Bill 1611. And they would specifically legalize power purchase agreements for basically every category except for residential. So government entities, schools, nonprofits, and businesses. So right now, the House bill is scheduled for its first reading, and the Senate bill is waiting for committee assignments. They've both been filed pretty recently, and session just started 2 days ago. Things can move fast though. So we're really excited about this, and we have a couple of next steps on the next slide that we would love to share with everyone. And sorry about that, I have a toddler in the background. So some of the next steps are to join our organizational sign-on letters. This is something that we will be doing a press release on soon. And basically, we have already had dozens of organizations sign on, but this is just raising your voice and saying that you support the legalization of power purchase agreements for Florida, and sharing this webinar, sharing our schools webinar that we had a couple of days ago. And we also have an individual support petition that we can share in a follow-up email and in the chat box as well. And I do want to leave some time for Q&A. I know that we're running a little short on time, so we are going to stick around and answer any questions that you have.
Thanks, Heaven. And thank you to our speakers for doing an amazing job. They have been answering some of the questions as we went, so some of them have shifted from that open column to the answered column. One question I'd like to throw out to all of our speakers I think is relevant is, what are your plans for energy storage and resilience?
So, we clearly want to be able to identify the opportunities where appropriate for energy storage and resilience. And that's kind of been another benefit that maybe we should amend the slide to add, is having Cherry Street kind of on hand, ready and willing to do that when we start seeing those capacity demands coming down the road. In communities in Georgia, there's also an opportunity to partner with our state energy office, with GIFA, on some funding opportunities for exactly that, and we're exploring more of those as well.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, we are beginning to pilot different types of energy storage solutions. So we're looking at vanadium redox flow batteries. We are piloting lithium ion at distributed sites where we have rooftop solar, and then the green hydrogen project, which I think from a long-term duration standpoint, green hydrogen is going to play a pretty massive role in these grids of the future that are primarily powered by more variable resources like solar and wind and the like. And so as we move in that direction, I think we all just need to be objective about how we reliably and resiliently make that transition. And we feel that those mix of storage are probably going to play a pretty big role. And the other thing to think about also is how our vehicles will play a role in storage in the future, right? In fact, it's anticipated that by 2030, there will be more storage in our cars than there will be deployed stationary across the entire grid. And so the ability of vehicle to grid interactions and to have mobile generators to roll up to a community center and be able to power that after a hurricane in Florida is a real possibility. And it's something that I know people are currently tinkering with right now, DIY style in their homes, but it's becoming a lot more enabled, both at the vehicle. Hopefully the automakers don't void warranties anymore, and also on the charger side of the house and the ability of that two-way flow of power to happen.
Likewise with us, we really rely on our solar partners, our solar provider, to determine when the storage options are economically feasible for them to install the infrastructure and still provide us a reduced rate lower than our local utility provider. And as soon as that makes sense, and as soon as that's available, we're definitely interested, especially facilities like I showed the Macon Coliseum, because a lot of those events are held at night, and when your solar panels are not producing. So we're definitely interested in it, relying on our solar provider to take the lead on when that be economically feasible.
And Rob, there's a follow-up question that's still in the Q&A about how the solar canopies specifically penciled out. So, there's a lot more steel and material involved in a canopy project. Can you speak to kind of the rate or the payback that you got on that particular project?
I really can't. I can't, Tish, because number one, that's why I hesitated to answer that, because to be honest with you, I can't tell you what the raise cost, because it cost me nothing. I mean, that would be a Cherry Street Energy question as well. They know what their investment is, and they know what their return on investment is. They would be more inclined to be able to answer that than myself. It's a quick return for me.
That's the best answer. And thank you, Daniel. He just posted in the Q&A that if you have questions about the Georgia project, so Cherry Street Energy was the solar provider for both City of Atlanta and Macon-Bibb County. So there's an email address, brent@cherrystreetenergy.com. So some more of those details about those, the prices and the rates can be answered by them. Awesome. Well, actually, I think we're going to wrap it up here since we're past the hour. So if we can pull up our last slide, please. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you to our amazing speakers. If you have follow-up questions, here's the contact information for Generation 180. You can reach us at solarschools@generation180.org. If you have questions about how to get involved in our campaign to help enable power purchase agreements in Florida, you can reach heaven@solarunitedneighbors.org. And we will have a recording available, of this webinar available on YouTube shortly. So stay tuned and we'll be sending you all follow-up information. Thank you so much and have a great day.